Hi friends, Ashley from Wildwoods&Homestead. I have a quick video for you today sharing what we eat in a day. So I brought you guys along for a day of meals. We are currently eating gluten-free, although some days I'm eating grain-free because I just feel better not eating any grains at all. However, I am breastfeeding, so I do find that I need some of those more starchier things like potatoes and rice. So we do have some of those things on with some meals. So we had made a quiche a couple of days before, and that's what we've been having for breakfast this week. We just make a big sheet of quiche, and it's got potatoes, cheese, eggs, onion. I think there were a few other things in there, like maybe some peppers and tomatoes. And then for that breakfast that morning, my boys also did a side of yogurt with some bananas and then a little bit of guacamole on top of that quiche. And then for lunch, I had roasted 2 chickens the day before, taken the meat off of those chickens and saved the bones for broth. My boys made a chicken salad for the next 2 days of lunches. On top of that, we had some boiled potatoes in the fridge that were left over from supper, so they added that to the chicken salad to sort of make a chicken potato salad. We paired that with some potato chips, some cucumbers, and these squeaker cheeses that I buy at Costco. And then on this day, I took the bones from the 2 chickens that I just mentioned earlier that I had roasted the day before, and I went ahead and made a chicken stock so that later in this day I could make a filling bean soup. The night before I got some beans soaking, and before getting all that together, I went ahead and just added all of my chicken bones to my cast iron Dutch oven along with some water and salt. And then typically I will add in some apple cider vinegar to help extract all the nutrients from the bones. And on this day, I was just adding in some spruce tip apple cider vinegar, and I have a recipe for that spruce tip apple cider vinegar that I can link in the description box for anyone who might be interested. Now, I mentioned that we have not been doing grains. I used to make sourdough, and I had an entire schedule. I would start on one day of the week, and then every day of the week I was doing something that was basically building up our larder, I guess you could say, of bread. So we were having sandwich bread, and then pancakes and biscuits and all of that. I was making English muffins, all of that. But since we realized that some of us were just not feeling good with the grains, even when I was properly fermenting the grains, we have tried gluten-free just to see how we feel. But we do miss bread, and so this is a recipe that I asked my daughter to share. She found this recipe online. She made some modifications to it, and I just filmed her putting it all together so that you could see how it's done. It's done with soaked rice, and then it's blended with all of her ingredients. It does have some yeast in it to help it rise, and then that just kind of gives it that yummy, delicious, yeasty bread flavor. And I will take her recipe and I will write it out and I will put it in the description box because that bread turns out so good. And we do try not to overdo the rice, but on nights where I'm really wanting carbs, I do ask her to make that bread because it's so delicious and it pairs so well with soups and stews. We've even used that bread to make little sandwiches or open-faced tuna sandwiches or avocado sandwiches, or open-faced avocado toast, something like that. It's delicious. Anyway, back to that soup. So I just took all the bones out of my stock and strained out my broth, and then I just sauteed 1 large onion along with some garlic and then some salt and pepper. And then I had a bunch of, I think it was pinto beans that I had started soaking the night before, and I just strained those out and rinsed them, put them in my stock pot with the rest of my bone broth, of my chicken broth that I made, and allowed that to simmer until those beans became nice and soft. So doing a bean soup is one of those soups that I love to get started in the early afternoon and then just let it simmer slowly and cook for a few hours on the stove. It just heats the kitchen. It starts to smell really nice and homey, and then I know that I have that cooking while I'm able to get other work done. You could do it in your Instant Pot, and then you don't need to do it so far in advance. I did used to do this in my Instant Pot, but our Instant Pot has since died, and I'm actually thinking I prefer cooking without it. I sort of like having that extra counter space, and I just enjoy kind of the therapeutic nature of stovetop cooking. So that's just a little tip there for the Instant Pot. But to that bean soup, I also added a little bit of milk and potato starch in because I wanted it to be a little bit thicker, and then I blended it and returned it back to the soup and let that simmer while I cut this bread. And I just wanted to do a close-up of this bread because it is just, the crumb on it is so soft and light, and it's just hard for me to believe that that is made from rice. She just takes rice and soaks it and mixes it with all of those ingredients, and again, I will have the recipe to that in the description box. But yeah, and then it's all blended, and it turned out so delicious. It was so good with a little bit of butter on it, and then paired with that soup. My daughter has also used this to make French toast, and it just holds up really well to making the French toast and then pairing it with that soup. And then here's the soup, and it turned out nice and thick because, as I said, I also added in a little bit of potato starch. And just a tip there, if you're going to thicken with any kind of starch, cornstarch, potato starch, arrowroot, tapioca starch, that is something I use a lot of since we've been doing gluten-free, grain-free, because those starches create really nice sauces for fruits, gravies, and soups and stews. You always want to dissolve your starch in something cold first, so a little bit of cold water or a little bit of cold milk. In this case, I dissolved it in a little bit of cold milk, and then I put it into my hot soup so that it wouldn't all just coagulate really quickly, but it would dissolve nicely. And it created this really nice, beautiful, thick soup. Both of my ladles were dirty, so I was just using a mug here. I also shredded some cheddar cheese and put that in the soup. I think cheddar cheese is a really good complement to a simple bean soup. I hope you gleaned something from this video, and thanks so much for joining me.